So let us pick up where we left in the previous video. So we have created a field map. Now let's add a name to that page. Let's call it field map. Simple. And then let me click on this little cross next to the field, the map, to create another page. And here I want to add two additional very popular visuals, and we will see how Power Query can help you here with that task. So first of all, I will add a clustered column chart, which is very, very popular. And again, if you're new to Power BI, you know that you can hold and move it around if you want, just by clicking on that and moving it. But instead of that, I'll just make it a bit bigger by dragging this side of this diagram. And then I will select country territory, and then I will select UN region, and I also select World Bank data to put it on this diagram. And observe that next to the World Bank, I have this summation sign, and that happened because I have changed actually my data type to numeric data. So if you don't get the diagram you're expecting, you need to go back to Power Query and change the data type to either decimal or whole number. For example, if I try to use United Nations instead of World Bank, so let's say I pick UN region and then I pick United Nations. And you see, instead of a nice diagram, I get this like strange, weird numbers. So if I click on World Bank again, I'll get the correct figure. So countries are different in terms of their GDP per capita. And you can easily fix the United Nations number. For that, let's go back to Power Query. So once again, we need to click on this transform data to relaunch it. And practitioners, they typically go back and forth between Power BI Desktop and Power Query. So if you are new to Power BI, please make sure that you know whether you are working in Power BI Desktop or you are working in Power Query. So let us launch once again Power Query, and you see that menus here are very different, right? So for Power BI Desktop, I have Get Data, Excel Workbook, and so on. And for Power Query, I would have New Source, Recent Sources, and so on. So again, look up at the title to understand actually if you are in Power BI or Power Query. And now let's proceed to the data for United Nations. So here we have column number 7, and once again you have ABC here, and you can easily change it to whole number. Observe that for every of your columns you will have 3 parts of this column name. So the first part here will be a data type, again either numeric data, or sometimes we have a textual data, or we may have a time data, true false data, and so on. Then in the middle you have the title of this column. If you click on it twice, you will be able to change it. So for example, GDP, UN data. And finally, similarly to Excel, you can click on this arrow and you will observe here the options of sorting, or sometimes you want to maybe remove some countries using number filters, very similar to Excel. For example, you take countries which have less than $10,000 per capita. A couple of things to remember about Power Query is that, of course, you can load multiple tables here, multiple queries. They will all be reflected in the left part of your screen. You can click on the name to rename it. Observe that all the steps you apply, they will be recorded here in the Applied Steps button, which makes it super convenient for automation of your tasks. Because in the future, if your data changes, for example, on Wikipedia, or we'll also use, for example, Excel files, if the data changes in the Excel files, you can click on refresh preview, and that will go once again through all the apply steps which you have done so far. And it's great for automation. You don't have to repeat some boring tasks every day. Here in this applied steps, you can also undo the last step if it was not what you intended to do. So for example, let us change it instead of whole number to date time zone, and we get some very weird results. It's not a time data, of course. So what we can do here, we just click on this little cross to the left of your change type, and that will undo this last step. So it's very easy to undo your last step. And as we did it before, let's now once again remove rows, remove errors so that we can get nice results. Sometimes this query settings window can be absent, or maybe you closed it unintentionally, and you can easily go to the view panel here, and if you click on this button query settings, bring it back. And again, in my view, it's very convenient to always have this query settings, because you can see all the steps which you have taken, and also you can see their order, and if it's necessary you can undo this last step. So we are done so far with Power Query. Once again, let's go back to home, click close and apply, and after data loads, you see that for the GDP UN data we have been added actually this summation sum, so now we are fine. Now we can use it for our analysis. Let's go back to our initial visual here. Observe that by default Power BI actually uses sum as the aggregation measure, so you can see it from here. Sum has been added, and of course we are not really interested in the sum, we are interested in the average standard of living, so you can easily change it here with the help of this little arrow and select average. And we can see that countries in Europe have the largest GDP per capita based on the World Bank data, and in Africa they have the lowest GDP per capita. And of course, there are endless opportunities how you can format this diagram. So if you click here on formatting button, you will see all the options. So for example, we can quickly change the title of this diagram. Just click on general option here, and instead of that long name, let's use GDP per capita, and let's put in brackets World Bank. And of course you can do all the necessary formatting here. Let's say I want to use 20s font, right? And maybe I want to put it like centered my diagram. So this is a great start, and now let's create another visual here. Remember that if your visual is currently active, if it has this little signs, then whatever you do with the diagram will apply to the current diagram. So for example, if I switch now to this scatter chart, it will, you see, changed my diagram. So it's important to undo this incorrect step. You can always do it like you do in other Microsoft applications, just by clicking on this arrow. And after that, I just have to put my cursor somewhere on this empty space on the canvas, and then I can create another diagram. In that case, I want to do a scatter chart, and I can make it a bit bigger once again by dragging it. And let's say I want to add a World Bank data and UN data. And interestingly enough, again, if you're new to Power BI, you see that only one dot has been added. It's very weird. But of course, if you work in Excel, you would see all the dots right away. And that's very important, fundamental difference between Power BI and Excel, because in Excel, you would get everything right away. Power BI works with big data by default, and it assumes that you want to aggregate data one way or another. So in this case, you have just one point. To add all the countries, what I can do here, I can click on country territory, and you see all of my countries have been added to the diagram. And as you know, some of the visuals in Power BI, they allow you to use some analytics. For example, it's available in the scatter chart. So if I click on this analytics button, the simplest thing you can do here is to add a trend line. And again, if you want, you can change the color, for example, to blue, like standard, very similar to Excel. And so we have added a second scatter plot using the data which we obtained through Power Query. Let's call this new page by clicking twice on it, GDP based on World Bank and United Nations, like a long name. And let's see how we can do a little bit of storytelling here in our first Power BI report. Thank you, and see you in the next video.